Our able chairman of the University Council, His Lordship, Justice V.J.M. Doche, will chair today's function. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome His Lordship, Chairman of the University Council and Chair of this event, to give us the welcome address.
Members of Council, Vice Chancellor, Co-Vice Chancellor, Professor Yidoho, Vice Council Chairman, Professor Fredrinka, Founding Vice Chancellor, representatives of Bank of Ghana, of National Accreditation Board, of National Council for Tertiary Education, representatives of World Health Organization, Vice Chancellors Ghana, President and members of the Volta Regional House of Chiefs, our respected chiefs and landlords from Sokoto traditional area, directors of ministries, departments and agencies, members of convocation, junior members of UHAS, and our invited students from the senior high schools, ladies and gentlemen of the press, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Governing Council of the University of Health and Allied Sciences, management and the entire university community, and on my own behalf, I welcome you all to the second special congregation of UHAS and to the second and final day of the 2019 annual John Evans ATTA-MILLS Leadership Lecture Series, delivered by our eminent speaker and an ardent scholar, Professor David Molyneux of the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine in the United Kingdom. Undoubtedly, this annual lecture series has become one of the foremost distinctive hallmarks of this university, thereby projecting it in the academic limelight. During this lecture series, we seek to find answers to daunting health issues and direct context to best practices and concrete ways of ensuring a better healthcare system for the international community, as our vision and mission enjoins us, i.e., to provide quality education, advanced knowledge through scholarship and research that improves health and quality of life. Through these lectures, we have set the agenda for future debates on health research and manpower planning needs, and thereby make us direct participants in charting the healthcare plan of the citizenry. Significantly, this event also provides the university with the academic recognition necessary to build an excellent university. As managers of this institution, we are determined to ensure that this dream becomes a reality in the not-too-distant future. Consequently, during this event, we aim at recognizing the individuals who, through the delivery of these decisive lectures, have demonstrated their excellence in various aspects of healthcare delivery and have by so doing contributed immensely towards improvement of health in line with the mission and vision of this university. Today, a distinguished personality will be recognized for his contribution to the development, promotion, and delivery of health services regionally and internationally. This award is also to recognize his outstanding research skills, which have provided groundbreaking solutions to eradication of tropical diseases in spite of all the odds. We are delighted to have heard from him yesterday, and will hear from him again today. And we have thus decided as a university to confer on him a special award. We are happy that through this singular event, we hereby establish strong ties with him and all his contacts, and we hope we will continue to benefit from his fountain of knowledge, and the university will break new grounds and frontiers with him as a mentor and associate. It is to this end that I welcome you all to the second special congregation of UHAS in honor of Professor David Molina Buchanan and to the great librarians of our university. We have heard him speak yesterday on the topic building momentum from evidence, policy and implementation for diseases of poverty. And on this second day, we shall hear him speak on the emerging challenges of disease eradication and elimination. Yesterday, when the Vice Chancellor introduced him, I'm sure everybody who was present yesterday was left in no doubt that our distinguished lecturer is an acclaimed scholar, an academic, and research scientist. He has done a lot, and we are definitely privileged to have him deliver this lecture series. Let me therefore make a special appeal to the Vice Chancellor and the management of the university to publish this lecture series and put together a team of experts to practicalize the suggestions and recommendations made. The University Council will support the university in this direction. Quite too often, we find these speeches, research findings are done in the various universities and they just gather dust. I am making a passionate appeal for UHAS to make a difference. As chairman of the University Council, I would like to extend our sincerest gratitude to Professor Molina for making it possible to share in his experiences and thoughts on the subject matter. I entreat the entire university community to join me to welcome all our distinguished invited guests from far and near who are here to support us today. And now, by the power vested in me as chairman of Council of the University of Health and Allied Sciences, I declare this special congregation duly constituted.
Chairman of Council, the Lordship Justice Stewart, members of Council, members of Convocation, deans and directors, Tokyo, Mamao, our colleagues from sister universities who are here. It is a great honor to have you all here today for the second day of this lecture series. As the Chairman of Council indicated, this will be followed by an honorary degree award as well. It is my job today to introduce the speaker. And for those of you who were here yesterday, I introduced him in a very elaborate manner. How many of you were not here yesterday? Quite a big crowd was not here. So I think it gives me justification to go over some of the things that I said. But we are here for lectures that have been instituted in the name and honor of our late President, the third President of the Fourth Republic, John Evans ATTA-MILLS, for his vision in establishing this university primarily. And yesterday I indicated that many institutions have similar lecture series that have been put out there from the Academy of Arts and Sciences to the University of Ghana and many other places. This does occur. And not just in Ghana, but outside the country as well. So we are doing the right thing. The university was established, and as I indicated yesterday, we currently are operating 7 of our academic institutions, and within the next couple of years, we expect another 3 to come to stream. And yesterday I indicated that I decided to leave the last one for the next vice chancellor to come and do. But the true reason is that I don't really know what it's about. So whoever is aspiring to be the next vice chancellor should begin to dream what an institute of medical education is. I've asked our forebears who were very instrumental in crafting the act which said we should have an institute of medical education. And they've told me a few things, but the fact that I'm not able to report on it tells you that I did not understand it very well. But as I indicated, we've made considerable progress. We now have a School of Basic and Biomedical Sciences here. And thanks to the generosity of Bank of Ghana, we are here. And I can see the Bank of Ghana rep here, so I'm smiling at their face and telling them that like Oliver Twist will be coming and asking for more. So thank you again, Bank of Ghana. We are very, very happy. If it hadn't been for Bank of Ghana, I wouldn't know where to hold this lecture. And all our obligations, I think we've had about 4 or so obligations here. We would have had it in the open, and then the rain we cannot predict. And so thank you very much, and we will come again. Lab complex just to my left and to your right is also coming up. They are now preparing to move, and we have all been told that we have to increase our intake in the 2020 academic year, because there are some people who are in double track. Are there some double track people here? There are some double track people here, you don't know. And I have said that our university is a university of health and allied sciences. Without our central laboratory, we cannot increase our intake. So they have come to site and they are trying to complete it for us. So that is our date. Our pharmacy block is also coming up nicely. And more importantly, our School of Public Health in Norway, which was abandoned for so many years, is also back on track. And our Dean, Professor Magrekweku, always at that place, making sure that the contractor is doing the right thing. So, for the young ones who do not know, this is the 700 acres of land which has been acquired by government for us at these premises. And all the buildings you see are in that area. So, in 10 years' time, UHAS will be a very great place. Within this year, we expect that the central administration will be built. That is the first red one that I'm showing. And then our School of Nursing and Midwifery, which is going to be twice as big as the School of Basic and Biomedical Sciences, will also be here. So it will become the proper Chinatown that the registrar referred to. But you see, when you join a train and you do not know its beginnings and its origins, you can be lost in the history. I remember very well in 2011 when the decision was made to set up those universities. There were many people who doubted whether it would ever happen. And this is the naysayers, the Chronicle. Oh, university behind me. I will read the rest. And for me, the more interesting one is what Daily Guide put out. Holy God, for better Ghana, admissions in progress, first matriculation, 1st September 2011, contact VC, Pro VC, registrar, Holy God, brothers and sisters. And you see the people who are coming. The snakes, the rats, and all the bushes. And I think we have become a country who just criticize without offering suggestions. And we need to reflect as a country to ensure that when developmental issues come up, we forge together. And then in spite of the challenges, we address them. I brought this up for also a very good reason. Because you see, here we are again. Now there is free senior high school, for which reason our schools are bursting on their seams. And we are complaining, and complaining, and complaining. And some of the complaints that I hear, they are spoiling our school. You went to Achimota, when you went to Achimota, there were just 2 or 3 of you in a room. Now there are 4 of you in a room. So you are complaining that your school is being spoiled. I'm sure when the chairman goes to Accra Academy or to Bishop Herman and those places, the Maoli people, they are all complaining that there are too many of us here. My question is, where should they go? If they haven't been in school, where will they be? So what we need to address as a country is our students, our children need to go to school. The infrastructure is not enough. There are some who are saying we should wait and build all the infrastructure before we begin to admit them. Unfortunately, I don't agree with that. Who should wait? So we need to put our shoulders to the wheel and address the challenge of our educational sector, because education is the bedrock of the development of every country. So let us not despise humble beginnings, and I'm sure we will definitely get there, as Plato said. Never discourage anyone who continually makes progress, no matter how slow it is. We will definitely get there. So, to the lectures. Our first lecture was delivered by Professor Samuel Kofi-Sepadide on higher education and its impact on development. That was in 2016. Dr. Delano Doflo delivered the second one on the people who work for our health, finding a fit-for-purpose workforce for sustainable development goals. Then we had the third one last year by the WHO Regional Director for Africa on universal coverage for health in Africa. Yesterday, we had Professor Molyneux begin the 4th lecture series. And Professor Molyneux, who I'm introducing today, is from the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine in the UK. He is a biologist by training and a veteran public health specialist with over 40 years experience, especially in international health. Currently, he is a senior professorial fellow and an emeritus professor of neglected tropical disease, NTDs. Yesterday, I heard some of the students say NTDs. It's not NTDs, it's NTDs. So, neglected tropical diseases, NTDs. Today, I decided to show the full gown of Professor Molyneux from Cambridge. He is a vector biologist and parasitologist. A lot of his research has been on parasites and vectors of the neglected tropical diseases. And yesterday when I mentioned TRIPS, leash, uncle, people were asking me what is all this. TRIPS is trypanosomas, otherwise known as sleeping sickness. Leash is leishmaniasis, and don't think it is very far away. Not too long ago, Professor Magrebeku did some work on some outbreak of leishmaniasis in the Volta region. Yes, so it's not far away, with support from Professor Kuram and Professor Daniel Wachi at Noguchi. And the work was revealed. So leishmaniasis is not far away from us. Onco is onchocerciasis, otherwise known as river blindness. LF is lymphatic filariasis, popularly called elephantiasis. And GW is guinea worm. And of course, malaria, all of you know. So these are the kind of diseases that Professor Molyneux has been working on over the last couple of decades. He's held several positions in the past. He was a professor in chair of biological sciences at Salford University from 1977 to 1983. I don't know how many of you were around. And then he became the Dean of Science at Salford from 1983 to 1991, and moved to the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine as director from 1991 to the year 2000. He stepped down as director and set up the Lymphatic Filariasis Support Center, which is now the Neglected Tropical Diseases Support Center. Now he has retired properly, because he has retired a few times. Now I believe he has retired properly. At 76, not many people can really keep going. But David is 76, and he's up and about. He's told me he's retired. I want to believe that. He's won several honors and awards. A few of them from the Royal Society of Tropical Medicine, the British Society of Parasitology. He won the Manson's Medal, the Mary Kingsley Medal, and many other medals. This is David as president of the British Parasitological Society, I believe. David receiving an award with the current director of neglected tropical diseases in the World Health Organization, Dr. Mwele Maletela, who is from Tanzania. This was, I think, in 2017. There's another one, I'm not too sure which one about it is, but when you Google, you find him holding so many plaques all over the place, and I wonder when you stop receiving them. And yesterday I said, even the Royal Society of Physicians have acknowledged it. David, as you see from the educational background, is not a medical doctor. I want to bring this issue up for your attention. There are so many of us who get into the sciences because we couldn't get into medical school. David could go to medical school by any margin of, any imagination at all you can think of. But he wanted to be a scientist, and he has become a renowned scientist. And we have a country where everybody who excels in science wants to go to medical school. And everybody who excels in the humanities wants to be a lawyer. It's as if there are only two professions in Ghana: medicine and law. I beseech you by the mercies of God, the students here, that there are many other professions where you can itself. So take note. That's another award from the US, one of the universities in the US. He has written over 400 peer-reviewed publications, edited several books. I decided to show one of them, and many other policy documents which have influenced lives. He has supervised over 50 PhDs. Yesterday I said they were tall and short, but the second photo I found today too is also tall. So some of you may recognize Dr. Bridgman from Ghana. He was the program manager for the neglected tropical diseases. He's the one on the right. And the one on the left, Dr. Dominic Kielen from Burkina Faso. May his soul rest in peace. He passed on not too long ago. David has also influenced global policy in diverse ways. The African Program for Scarces, Task Force on Disease Eradication, Guinea worm eradication, Global Alliance for Elimination of LF, European Foundation initiatives for NTDs, and several WHO committees. He serves as scientific advisor on many other committees, from Countdown to all. His work in Guinea worm has taken him to meet several people, governors, ministers of health in Nigeria in particular, and very important. But David enjoys his field work and is always in the field. That's another one of him, in the field. David is also a regular person. He's married to Anita, and I think this is the photo they took in Bobo de Lasso in 1973, 74. David has been trying to find out how I got this photos, but you see, I signed a non-disclosure agreement with my source. So I'm willing to tell him how I got these photos. And that is David and Anita again, and the family. He has 2 adult children and their spouses. David enjoys sports. He loves to play golf. And I think this is with his son. But he loves Manchester United. When they lost against Barca, I called to him and then he said, "We would rather be eliminated by Barca than Liverpool."
Good fashion.
So he tells you he lives in Liverpool, he's run his career in Liverpool, but he's a Man U fan. I don't know what's wrong with him. Yesterday I showed this photo that David loves fun, but many people did not recognize who was in the photo. That was President Carter. I'm sure he will tell a story about President Carter, but I learned that influence is so important. We talk about this global program for lymphatic filariasis. When we started, we were negotiating and lobbying to get GSK to make a donation for albendazole. He took a phone call from this man to get this thing to happen. You need to try and speak to people of influence. So when we don't make progress, you can get David Molyneux to call Jimmy Carter, to call the right person to make the right decisions. So ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Professor David S. Molyneux. Lecturer for the day. Thank you very much.
Both now and in the future. I repeat my accolades to President Mills for his vision in the establishment of UHAS and seeing it come to fruition in an occasion such as this. Now, eradication of infectious diseases has been on the intellectual agenda, in particular since the one disease, human disease on the planet to have been eradicated has been achieved, and that was smallpox, which was declared eradicated by the World Health Assembly in 1980. Since that time, there have been a couple of books about the principles of eradication of infectious diseases, led very largely by Don Hopkins of the Carter Center, formerly with the CDC, and Walter Dowdell. And this is just an example of a book which they published on eradication as a topic. But it listed criteria which needed to be examined in relation to the eradicability of a particular infection. Now, about 15 years ago, with Don Hopkins and Nevio Zachariah from the World Health Organization, it became clear to us that there was, as described in this title, the need for accurate and consistent usage of terminology. And the reason for that was that many people were interchanging in their discourse control, elimination, eradication, without really understanding the implications of what they were saying. Now, the International Task Force, following the eradication of smallpox, was established to examine infectious diseases to decide on which of those conditions might be eradicated. And it came out with a list of 6 on this board: dracunculiasis or guinea worm, polio, cysticercosis, which is a tapeworm infection, rubella, lymphatic filariasis, and mumps. That list has not changed, but subsequently to the International Task Force for Disease Eradication making this judgment, the Carter Center established the International Task Force for Disease Eradication, which now still continues. But the first task force examined some 100 different infectious agents. I use the word infectious agents advisedly because I want you to get in your mind something which, for me, is really important. And that is to make the distinction between infection and disease. And that's because we are all infected with something, many things, but those infections are not causing any overt disease. And this is important when it comes to assessing these terminologies and indeed the interventions themselves. So the World Health Organization, in consultation with various experts, came up with this list of definitions. And they're relatively self-evident, but I want to highlight 1 or 2 issues here. Control is a process which goes on continuously, and you can't stop it, because if you do stop it, there'll be a resurgence in the incidence. Elimination of disease is here distinguished from elimination of infection, for the reason really I've mentioned, that that's reduction to 0 of the incidence of a specific disease in a defined geographical area. And this one, elimination of infection, is the reduction to 0 of the incidence of infection caused by a specific agent. And that's important. Again, in a defined geographical area. So elimination, as I'll show later, is about geography and definition of the area to define elimination. Now, eradication, which I'm going to talk about to start with, has a very important definition. That is permanent reduction to 0 incidence, i.e. no new cases, usually for a period of 3 years before certification can take place. But 0 incidence of infection caused by a specific agent. That is really important. As a result of deliberate efforts, etc. And you can go away and you don't need to do anything ever again, as in the case of smallpox. There's another category category here, extinction, when the infectious agent no longer exists in nature or in the laboratory. Smallpox was eradicated, but there are still stocks of smallpox in 2 laboratories in the world, one in the CDC in Atlanta and probably another one somewhere in Russia. So those agents still exist on the planet, although they're not naturally circulating. And after the eradication of smallpox was confirmed, indeed, there were 2 cases in the UK of laboratory infections for people doing laboratory studies on smallpox, one in London and one in Birmingham. So there is a distinction. So extinction of an agent can take place, and indeed extinctions of species of vector have taken place in this part of the world because of vector control against black flies transmitting river blindness. The vector control program has eliminated to extinction this organism. This black fly no longer exists on the planet. There are populations of discrete species in Benin, in Sierra Leone, and more recently on the island of Bioko. All gone forever and will never come back. But that's not the agent, that was just the vector. But it's an example of the distinction. Now, looking back, there have been historic eradication programs. And I use the word eradication here in inverted commas. Because in fact, the feasibility of eradication in these settings was really very doubtful, and nobody really understood the definition at the time. The first program with that title was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, the Rockefeller Sanitary Commission for the Eradication of Hookworm in the southern USA, starting in 1910. And that was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation when a parasitologist, Stiles, gave a presentation to the Board of Governors of the Rockefeller Foundation. Ironically, somebody on the board was called Mr. Gates. And John D. Rockefeller, who was the richest man on the planet, gave this program $1 million in 1910, which in those days was a lot of money. I suspect it still is. However, that program, hookworm is a worm disease. 40% of the population of the southern states of the US was the hookworm belt, and 40% were infected with hookworm. The control, as it turned out, that the objective of the program, the eradication program, was based on 3 tenets. 1, mapping. 2, treatment, with a concoction of Epsom salts and thiamol, and public health education. Mapping, treatment, and public health education are the components of most of the NTD programs today. The hookworm program didn't succeed in removing forever the incidence of hookworm, but it did have a significant public health success. The most successful eradication, in inverted commas, was undertaken in Brazil by American entomologist Fred Sober, who eliminated an invasion of African Anopheles gambiae in northeast Brazil in the 1930s. This was spectacularly important in the context of the Brazilian economy, probably more important now than it could ever have been then, because if that organism, that mosquito, had not been eradicated from Brazil, truly it wasn't eradication because gambiae exists in Africa, it was elimination. But regional elimination of Anopheles gambiae had probably a profound effect on the economic development of that part of Brazil. Because if falciparum malaria had established there, it would have had very serious downstream consequences. Now, malaria eradication in the 1950s, initiated in 1950 by the World Health Organization, was abandoned in the 60s because it failed because of resistance to chloroquine and resistance to DDT. I think we need to reflect. We have resistance to pyrethroids throughout Africa. We have resistance to artemisinin emerging, particularly in Southeast Asia. Are we any different? I'll talk about malaria eradication in a minute. Yaws eradication is back on the agenda. There having been a yaws eradication program in the 1950s and 60s based on the intramuscular injection of penicillin. Yaws eradication now, in the future, will be based on the use of oral azithromycin in children and looks extremely promising in terms of the efficacy of that treatment that can reach all the areas where yaws is endemic. Now, I come back to the terminology, and the terminology I've just showed you on the slides from WHO of the definitions was published, but within a week, the WHO weekly epidemiological record had used the wrong terminology. Eradication of yaws in India. It wasn't eradication because eradication is a global phenomenon. It was elimination of yaws in India after a 20-year program based on the use of penicillin, but very successful nonetheless. But if WHO can't use the right terminology, who can? Now, in defining how we develop a public health program, whether it's for eradication or elimination, you have to go through certain processes. Is there a public health problem? What is the scientific feasibility of the intervention? And is the strategy tested? We need WHO World Health Assembly resolutions to encourage member states to engage and sign up. We need to create a constituency of partners who can act as advocates, and including in those partnerships the donor community. And are the interventions available? Do we have the donations, if they're necessary? Do we have the epidemiological data mapping, as was required in 1910 by the Rockefeller Sanitary Commission in the southern states of the US? Is the public health problem of a scale based on prevalence, incidence, morbidity and mortality which merits intervention in terms of the burden of disease? And have we got the advocates, as Johnny said? Jimmy Carter in Nigeria, Yakubu Gowon, Bill Gates, particularly for polio and malaria. And can we build partnerships and establish for the interventions very often the non-governmental development organisation commitment, NGO commitment, because they have been a seriously important platform in many of the drug donation programs. Now, I come to this slide which shows, as I did yesterday, the Sustainable Development Goals, which emphasise really multidisciplinarity, multi-sectoral interventions, be it through education, be it through health, be it through water and sanitation provision, be it through good planning, issues around climate change and biodiversity. That is a very much more holistic approach to health in terms of the ultimate goal of alleviating poverty. But we have on the right here the WHO roadmap, which is a roadmap which deals with diseases specifically and offers specific targets to be achieved for the successful achievement of the various epidemiological targets. And those are issues which are what I call a serious dichotomy. We have the broader macro picture of health and development, and yet we have the very specific objectives of the individual programs, alliances, and donation programs. So that's something I think we have to solve and bear in mind, because it can create tensions, and maybe it distorts our activities towards a particular endpoint. Now, I mentioned smallpox, and these are some historic slides from the smallpox program. The gentleman here was the last case of smallpox on the planet, outside London and Birmingham laboratories. This is the smallpox zero badge of WHO. And I show the helicopter for an important reason. Because I was associated with helicopter operations in the Onco program. and I saw their value in delivering insecticides to the river systems of West Africa. But they also played a significant role in the mopping up of smallpox in Somalia and Ethiopia, because they were able to reach remote populations and immunise and vaccinate those people at risk in the surrounding areas, so you had a ring vaccination. So you got down to the last case and protected the population who might have been at risk. And the reason for that was that smallpox has a very short incubation period. And that's a great advantage, because you can immunise the population when you detect a case and immunise them quickly. Helicopters are invaluable in that area, and because they can get to places that we can't get to by road. The same applied to the Onchocerciasis control program in West Africa. Nobody could have treated 20,000 kilometres of West African river in a week without a helicopter. It would not have been possible to do it by road. So helicopters have a value and should not be underestimated. I suspect drones in the future might actually have a bigger role in health than we imagine. But the celebration of the smallpox success story is identified in the statue outside WHO Geneva. And those of you who have visited WHO will have seen this on many occasions. One thing which was important to confirm the absence of smallpox on the planet was this poster developed by the smallpox program, which provided a reward of $1,000 in 1977, 8 and so on, for anybody who reported a smallpox case. Nobody did. And so in 1980, the World Health Assembly certified the global eradication of smallpox. A huge public health success. What follows smallpox? Well, the current agenda is polio, guinea worm, yaws, and I put malaria in inverted commas because it's one of Bill Gates' passions. But I have to emphasise one thing. You do not eradicate a disease. You eradicate from the planet a specific infection. That is the definition. Elimination of malaria, yes, not eradication, unless you choose one of the 6 species of human plasmodium. Falciparum, Vivax, Knowles-Lyme malariae, Brazilianum, Movaca. Which one are you going to choose? 2 of them now are zoonoses. So the malaria community needs to decide whether it wants to use the terminology correctly or not. Because at present they're ignoring the globally accepted definition of eradication. And the key issue here, or the key issues around the guinea worm program, was it was another target for eradication initiated in the 1980s after smallpox was confirmed to be eradicated. But it was associated with the International Water Decade in the 1980s. Because if you drink safe water, you will never get guinea worm. Just like that. It's a big worm. It's about 1 metre long when it emerges, usually from the limbs. But there's no drug, no vaccine, and no diagnostic except the emergence of the worm. In the 1980s, the view, belief, certainty was that there was no animal reservoir. The Commission, the International Commission on Disease Eradication, declared it was absolutely eradicable. And there was leadership from the Carter Centre with UNICEF to provide safe water provision, as well as other donors, particularly JICA and the World Health Organization. So the global guinea worm eradication program was born. The essentials are a nematode parasite called Dracunculus medinensis, transmitted to humans by the ingestion of water fleas, which is very common in fresh water. The adult worms are a metre long. But the thing to remember, from the ingestion of an infected water tree to the emergence of a hanging worm is 1 year, 12 to 14 months. That poses, for an eradication program, a huge problem. Not 2 weeks like smallpox, but a year. You don't know where somebody will be within a year. They acquire an infection, they could be anywhere. When the worm emerges through a burning sensation ulcer, millions of larvae are released into the water. The behaviour pattern of people infected are to seek water to relieve the burning sensation. But the essentials of the programme are very simple. Surveillance, provision of clean water. If you're at risk of being contaminated, filter that water. If you have a case in a village that you suspect has entered water, then you kill the copepods with a larvicide agent, an insecticide called Temafos or Abate. Then you build on community education, health education, using media sources or drama groups. Any case detected must be contained and prevented accessing water. And then you offer monetary reward towards the end of the programme to ensure that people report. And if there are rumours reported, you've checked those rumours within 24 hours. This is the track of guinea worm disease from 1988 to 2016. It's roughly the same now. We're down to 20 odd cases a year. This is the story in Ghana. It maps the same track. Ghana was the last human case was in, I think, 2010 or 11. You need 3 years without any infection being detected, human case or animal, before you can submit a request for certification to WHO. And then a team comes and evaluates the information and report of the national governments. In 2006, there was a peak, and that was due to the breakdown of the Tammany water supply and people using water from a large water source and selling water in the town, which was contaminated. So you had a rapid peak of infection in Tammany. President Carter, who had invested Carter Center activities, came to Ghana and met your then president, and famously said, "You've got all the resources to get rid of this. I'm going to change the name from guinea worm to Ghana worm if you don't do something about it." And that's a true story. And my goodness, they did. With the result that and this is the speed at which you can go down. From, let's just take a look at that track. From 3,000 cases to 500 to 200 to 0. That's what you can do with simple interventions, like stopping people drinking contaminated water. What is the current situation? Well, we have cases in Chad, South Sudan, in humans, and 2 of the endemic countries, Ethiopia and Mali, who's not shown on here, have cases in animals that have not had human cases. And in the early part of 2010, 2011, suddenly we became faced with cases in dogs in Chad. And this has become a major problem. But there's another spot here. This case was detected in April last year on the borders of Angola and Namibia. Why spontaneous generation does not happen? And it is, to me, inconceivable that people are travelling from Chad to Angola or South Sudan to Angola, crossing the whole of the Congo Basin to get there. That is not for me conceivable. So it must have been that there was, or has been, a low-lying endemicity of guinea worm in Angola for many, many years undetected. This poses a huge problem, because as you see, Angola is not a small country. But once we have one case confirmed, and now we have two, we are going to have to institute a whole process because we have to certify the whole of Angola as free of infection and transmission. And there are very limited resources, and the surveillance and the health system in that country is not quite as good as it is here. Now, if we go then to the issue of dogs, the current status is here. Asia is free of transmission. We've certified Kenya. There's ongoing transmission of some kind in 4 countries, Ethiopia, Mali, South Sudan, and Chad. We need to certify DRC and Sudan. I just mentioned innovation again because I love the idea and particularly the simplicity of it. The exercise book for children in school, the drinking straw, which is so simple and stops people getting infected, and you can walk around with like a lanyard around the neck. And in Nigeria, they use stamps to promote the guinea worm program, as shown on this slide. The importance of cash reward is important. All endemic countries and post-certified countries, including Ghana, have a cash reward available. So you'll see in 2010, in 2010, Ghana had a cash reward of $134 for reporting a case of guinea worm. None were reported. But there are posters, there are telephone numbers, free calls, if you have a suspect guinea worm, which has to be followed up and recorded as a rumour and followed up within 24 hours. This is just an example of the use of the mobile phone and technology and mobile health in reporting cases. This is from Burkina Faso. But the challenge of guinea worm is not dissimilar to the problems of conflict that we've seen in polio. Because in guinea worm, when we were in Nigeria on a mission, Boko Haram set fire to a school and killed 30 children. There have been 3 deaths associated with the guinea worm program in Physics in Sudan and in Niger. So certification issues and surveillance issues are not low risk. This is just a guinea worm village worker doing health education studies. But we now have the dog problem in Chad. There are something like, last year, 1,000 dogs reported infected in Chad. And this is a dog with a worm emerging, very much like humans. The theory is that their dogs are becoming infected by eating fish, which have become parasitic hosts. We don't know the answer to that. But what we do know is unless there are no recorded dog infections in Chad and Mali, we cannot confirm that there is end of transmission. There may be no human cases, as there have not been in Mali for 3 years. But the Certification Commission can't say, because there are infected dogs, that guinea worm transmission or Dracunculus medinensis transmission is not taking place in Mali because of the dog infection. Humans may not be infected, but that doesn't matter, because the definition of eradication is that agent, Dracunculus medinensis. There may be no human cases in Mali or Chad for 50 years, but if there are human cases, because of the definition, we cannot certify it is going to be eradicated. And the Commission has to be more than 100% certain that there's no transmission, because proving a negative in science is incredibly difficult. And now for something completely different. I've touched on eradication. I'm going to move to elimination. Why something entirely different? This is the least tropical place on the planet. It's Iceland. Iceland is a fascinating country, but a disease called hydatid disease is historically present in Iceland for many years. And it's caused by a tapeworm infection in dogs, which humans acquire when they get contaminated with the eggs of the tapeworm in fecal samples from dogs. The normal cycle is between dogs and sheep. Because of the intimacy of the relationship between dogs and sheep and people, humans frequently get infected with cysts which can mimic cancerous cells, cysts, because they grow in the liver, the lungs, sometimes other organs, and really surgery is the only option. And this is a paper, and I know that your Vice Chancellor reads this journal avidly every week, the International Journal of Osteoarchaeology, where a group of Icelanders who have the most unpronounceable names described the cysts in exhumed bodies in a archaeological site in medieval Iceland. I put on the left a book which I read called Burial Rites by an Australian called Hannah Kent, who again made a very strange journey to do some studies in Iceland from Australia. But nonetheless, this is a fascinating book about Iceland at the time. The first parasite disease program that I'm aware of started, because this disease was very serious in Iceland, both in terms of the impact on the sheep population, in terms of the loss of value of the sheep, but also in terms of human beings getting an incurable disease. This is in Icelandic, and apologies because I don't know a word of Icelandic, but it was a document, it was a document produced by a Danish veterinarian called Harold Krabbe in 1864, and there was a follow-up paper about 20 years later, which described what you did to the population of Iceland in terms of preventing hydatid disease. Basic issues like hygiene, purging dogs, making sure sheep offal was not available to dogs, essentially improving the slaughter practices of the sheep. And this leaflet was avidly read by Icelanders because they had they're a highly literate population, but that literacy was based on two books, the Bible and Icelandic science, and they actually preferred to read something else. And that's why they imbibed the information coming from Krabbe and his colleagues. And Iceland has been free of this condition for many years. The condition is the Echinococcus granulosus, and it's been eliminated, and I choose the word carefully, despite the fact that some people use eradication, in Iceland, Tasmania, Cyprus, and New Zealand, because it was a very important economic impact. It had a very important economic impact on the New Zealand sheep economy. But the message from this is you can do it easily on islands. But it takes a long time. But in Iceland, Tasmania, and New Zealand, I don't think Cyprus, the elimination of transmission of hydatid disease has stopped. I come back to a slide I showed yesterday, Burkina Faso and the Onchocerciasis control program with some experiences there. These are images, Lobi statues, and again using stamps to promote the program. And a picture of David Baldry of people who are all blind. And that's in Burkina, near Ouaga. Well, the helicopters coming here, as I said, because the vector control side of the Onchocerciasis control program was based on helicopter application during most of its time, but certainly to start with only on vector control. Weekly insecticide application. I think of up to 20,000 plus kilometers of river in West Africa. Fantastic organisation, highly successful, and not too costly in terms of what the impact has been. So we have three Onchocerciasis control programs. The Onchocerciasis control program in West Africa, the Onchocerciasis program for African program for onchocerciasis control, and in the Americas, the program called OEPA, which is the regional elimination of onchocerciasis. None of these are eradication. And the first one is control. But I want you to look at the second part of that objective. Elimination, control of onchocerciasis as a problem of public health importance. And actually, I missed a word out. Should have been control of blinding onchocerciasis. And as an impediment to socio-economic development. The second one, no longer a disease of public health importance. And the regional elimination of onchocerciasis in the Americas is important, as I'll show you. The achievements of the onco programs have been spectacular, and they're listed here, and I won't go through them. But high economic rates of return, hundreds of thousands of cases of blindness prevented, as well as skin disease, and also one of the great legacies is the involvement of communities in the distribution of free drugs. And 100 million treatments every year in Africa, a high coverage of the infected population. But in 2009 things changed because the perception through this paper was that using ivermectin treatment alone, the donated drug, you could stop transmission, but you had to do that for a period of high coverage over 15 to 17 years. And that changed the paradigm for the onchocerciasis programs because they were encouraged, particularly by the Gates Foundation, to strive for elimination. Not as a public health problem, but elimination of transmission. And that presents significant challenges, and those challenges continue. In the Americas, it is very interesting because instead of once a year ivermectin distribution, in Africa, twice a year distribution in foci in Mexico, Guatemala, Venezuela, Colombia and Ecuador were the norm strategy. And that resulted, first of all in Colombia, then Ecuador, then Mexico and Guatemala, being verified as free of onchocerciasis transmission. We still have problems in Venezuela and Brazil, largely because of the remoteness of the communities and the difficulties of access. But I just want to point out that the country has received great accolades because the endemicity disappeared. And Colombia is quite an interesting example because it was the first country to eliminate transmission of the disease. But when I asked people how many people were in the Colombian onco-focus, they are staggered. Because actually, there are only 1,500 people in the Colombian Ecuador focus, which is probably just twice as many as there are in this room. And yet, there are great singing and dancing and celebrations, and Mr. Carter flew all the way to Bogota to celebrate this achievement. In Ecuador, there were 2 foci, and only had 5,000 each. Now, whilst these are major achievements, they pale nothing in comparison with the problems of onchocerciasis in Africa or filariasis in India. So we have to get things at scale. There are far more people successfully treated in Guatemala and Mexico with very good results. But put things in proportion. I mean, I might say that also about filariasis programs in the Pacific, because some of those countries have got populations of only 1,500 people. This is the challenge of onchocerciasis in the Amazon. Access is difficult, only by river, there are roads. And in Bioko, Equatorial Guinea, again, high forest transmission was controlled, indeed eliminated. The black fly was eliminated by aerial spray. An island, no reinvasion, particular form of black fly transmitting the infection there, but no reinvasion, and that particular genetically distinct form has been made extinct. So, what are the challenges of the end game? The polio program is now using the end game. I alluded to them yesterday, but it's biological. Is the drug efficacious? Can we develop the Holy Grail as a macrophilaricide, something that's going to kill the adult worms? Can we overcome the problems of tropical eyeworm with the consequences of serious adverse effects? There are associated geographic issues, issues of adherence, coverage, access, water and sanitation, community distributors requiring incentives not unreasonably, the logistics, the costs of monitoring and evaluation and surveillance. There are strategic issues. Actually, the more interventions you put in, the more complex things become epidemiologically, and there's complexities which tend to confuse the implementation. We have issues, technical issues of diagnostics. We don't have adequate diagnostics. Drug formulations, pediatric praziquantel is necessary to treat young children who are acquiring schistosomiasis at a very early age. And only last week, mebendazole, a chewable formulation of mebendazole, was pre-qualified by WHO. And there's the issues of policy uptake, making the case and following WHO recommendations. I mentioned filariasis as a problem, and I refer to two strategies to interrupt transmission, mass drug distribution, but then also to reduce the suffering and improve the quality of life. And I may put this slide up. Achieving elimination is not an end in itself. We must remember that there are people who are still afflicted. But what countries like, this is Sri Lanka, they like the accolade of achieving success, certification as a filariasis-free country, and we have all the ceremonial procedures which accompany that. So, what are the final challenges? The uphill battle, the last mile or the last kilometre? Well, just in the case of a few of the examples I've given, insecurity in Mali, remote and endemic areas in Ethiopia for guinea worm. What are we going to do about the dogs? And in Ethiopia, we have baboons infected. They're not the easiest things to actually reach. If you have infections in Chad, and there's 1,000 dogs there, it's risking infection crossing the border into formerly certified countries like Central African Republic, Nigeria, Cameroon, Niger. Once we have confirmed a case in a country like that, and transmission is reoccurring, we have to go through a recertification process. In guinea worm, we have to maintain surveillance even in post-certified countries, the reward system and so on. Take the opportunity of linking it to polio. And probably we're going to introduce a global reward as in smallpox. We have to maintain the advocacy of President Carter and anybody else who's prepared to step into his shoes. But looking at Ghana, these programs with which I'm familiar, we published this paper with one of the world's leading macroeconomists, Jeff Sachs, looking at Ghana's success in the context of its economic development. If you take the big picture, Ghana has got rid of guinea worm. It's made huge impact on trachoma, if not eliminated it. Same with filariasis. Same with sleeping sickness, and huge progress in onchocerciasis. This is a success story for which we can be proud, and the natural resources and the capacity which Ghana's provided for these programs is enormous. So I'd finish by saying, in terms of eradication, elimination, please use the terminology correctly. Remember, eradication is zero instance of a specific agent, not a disease. And it's a very long-term commitment, and it's a costly commitment. Elimination is regional, and expect surprises. Dogs, what transmission of vaccine-derived poliovirus, migration. Islands are easy. We need the WHO leadership, partnership and alliances, and strategically ongoing operational implementation research to really inform us what the best strategies are. And as I said yesterday, don't expect magic bullets. Thank you again to this wonderful institution for this special opportunity, and particularly the Vice-Chancellor for his vision, generosity, leadership, and to many people, my own institution, and the donors who have supported me over many years, and to particularly those individuals who've been part of the NTT journey, and let's hope it will continue. My students and to my family, thank you very much, and may I wish you well in the future. Thank you.
Please, I would like to ask, Prof said, not all NTDs, I want to know if all NTDs are infections and not diseases, because he made a difference between infections and diseases. So if all NTDs are not infections, then how are we going about with the eradication programs? Thank you.
Please,
Can you identify yourself?
my name is Blaise. I'm a Blaise, a level 300 pharmacy student. In the Prof's presentation, he made mention of the use of medication to treat these parasites. We found ourselves in an area where the antibiotics are not a problem. So I want to know if there are methods or procedures in place to ensure that if the medications for these parasitic infections, when there's resistance to them, there will be new ones available for.
Okay, it's a very important issue.
There's one thing that was very interesting. I'm wondering why Russia and the US are still keeping smallpox, and particularly the mention of those two countries. Are we looking at a chance of weaponization and smallpox coming back? Thank you.
Not been immunised from smallpox since 1980. If you wanted to manufacture an agent which would decimate the world's population, you only could think of smallpox. Pretty depressing. It is true. Why wouldn't they get rid of them otherwise? I think I got the second question about resistance. We have not experienced drug resistance against parasitic infections to the extent that is present in bacteria. There are risks in the use of azithromycin in trachoma and in UHAS programs. This is some concern to the community, but in the case of azithromycin and UHAS, for example, there are backups with penicillin-based antibiotics. The one interesting study actually undertaken in Ghana by Mike Osei was detecting a reduced response to ivermectin in the Azabendi area about 10 years ago, which was published in the Lancet. Caused a lot of problems. Not for me or you, Johnny, but for the onco community, because it suggested that ivermectin resistance was occurring. That really has not been substantiated. It may have been a population that didn't respond as rapidly. But we have to be aware, there are colleagues that I work with and know who are pretty convinced it will happen. So we have to have a fallback position. But while something is working, there is no reason for it not to be used in public health. The other point I would make, and it applies to vector-borne diseases of the NTDs, and I'm thinking particularly of filariasis, but also dengue, where we are ignoring the presence of insecticide resistance due to synthetic pyrethroids. And there are papers in the Lancet demonstrating that there is widespread pyrethroid resistance, which is the product which is on your bed nets, throughout Africa. And our group in Liverpool, the Integrated Vector Control Consortium, is really trying to push the agenda for alternative insecticides. That group, the Integrated Vector Control Consortium, is the only public-private partnership addressing vectors and insecticide resistance. And that's really interesting because we have public-private partnerships for product development, for fine, for diagnosis, medicines for malaria venture, TB, and so on. Now, if you find a product which can kill an insect, which is acceptable environmentally, relatively cheap, and safe to apply, then it will kill any insect. Bear in mind that insects are transmitting dengue, malaria, filariasis, river blindness, etc., etc. So one effective product would save a lot of problems across the spectrum of other infectious diseases. So managing resistance, as the onchocerciasis program did beautifully, because it injected the rotational use of 6 different insecticides, which were all environmentally acceptable, was a spectacular achievement, because they had to do it very quickly. I think the final point about non-infectious neglected diseases and eradication or elimination, well, the 2 non-infectious NTDs on the list are snake bite. I think to eradicate snake bite, you'd have to eradicate snakes. I think this is about really issues of management, quality, access to quality antivenoms. And because the antivenom market is gone, Sanofi stopped manufacturing the only antivenom available for Echis caulinatus bites 2 years ago. And the products that are currently being imported into Africa, I regret to say, are of dubious quality. And it's the Kofi Annan Foundation that is actually trying to raise awareness to this problem. So there may be some time before effective antivenoms are available and affordable. The other non-infectious NTD is a disease called podoconiosis, which for simple terms is a non-infective elephantiasis which you get by walking on volcanic soils. And it mimics essentially the pathology of filariasis or elephantiasis. Most common in Ethiopia, some in Cameroon and Uganda. But the point about this condition, it is very simple to solve it. You wear shoes. The poor people don't have shoes. And once they get the volcanic particles into the feet, you have a pathology which is identical essentially to filariasis. And the condition is more or less the same. And it impoverishes people, reduces their ability to earn, etc. I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, I think so. Yes, I know that
the malaria elimination community or the malaria community has made tremendous advances by changing its mindset. For many years, we thought elimination was supposed to be achieved regionally, but now we are accepting elimination even at sub-district, at sub-national levels. So you can eliminate malaria in parts of Ghana and not actually eliminate malaria in the whole of Ghana. This is helping because the attitude, like you said in your talk, we're looking at issues of shrinking the map. So if we have current situations in our country, the major goal is that we should stop this control business. Malaria now is going through a whole spectrum where if the transmission is very, very low, the issue is eliminate the disease from there. And don't do the same thing across the country because the malaria transmission in every country is very, very different. I mean, geographical differences are so large, there's no reason to be doing the same thing in the Upper East region, in the Greater Accra region, or on the mountains in the Kwahu area, or in Ashanti. So we hope that we could get across that bridge and use data and information to direct both control and elimination.
Thank you. Change in the thinking now that you can actually do sub-regional elimination even within countries is something that we need to take a look. It's taking a bit of time for this to sink through, and I think one of the things is also the WHO usually comes with sort of global things for people to do, which some of us have always advocated, and we need to look at that situation, look at our data, and respond appropriately. So I think with these changes coming up, we should be able to do this. And the current data from the country shows clearly that around most of the urban areas, for example, prevalence rates are around 5% of things. And as I said, you cannot do the same things in these areas as you're doing in high infection or the high transmission area around one of the places we're working now, for example, the Park Road in the Eastern region and things like that. And I think that is being accepted, and we should be able to see some changes in the coming days.
Some traditional healers have a procedure that can protect you against snake bite. But I don't think we have investigated this. Maybe those of you who are working in the area can look in that direction. For collaboration between the scientists in the academies and the traditional healers who claim they can protect you against snake bite by introducing.
Can you clarify? You mean the snake will not bite you, or when it bites you?
When it bites you, you don't get poison. Okay. And they introduce something into your system, which you can call inoculation. This is a claim. Let's say it's a claim. But we have to investigate it and know whether it's something that we can work with.
Great. David. Oh, yes. Well, however, one point about my colleague Rob Harrison, and I mentioned him yesterday in the context of the Kofi Annan Foundation, has been in contact with Professor Richard Phillips in Kumasi, and I think that my suggestion would be that you make contact with Rob Harrison, who's one of the global leaders of this. So I think that's the way forward. And I'm sure he's taken that on board in terms of the commission. I am certainly not going to attempt to. And Wallace Peters said in his last presentation when he was invited to Geneva to address the Medicines and Malaria community, he said, "You will only manage malaria. You will never eradicate it." So I think it's the management of malaria. Now, from a biological perspective, I look upon malaria through the eyes of one of the most rapidly reproducing vectors in life, and therefore exposed to extraordinary selective pressure. And secondly, the most rapidly evolving sexual parasite release, with massive numbers of organisms and very rapid generation time. When you put those two things together, you have what I think is a very difficult combination for science to actually get to and solve because of the speed of change. And the problem with the speed of change is that we take WHO and policy, be it for drugs or insecticides or whatever, things do not move very fast. And as countries know too well, to implement a recommendation could take time. To get WHO to make a recommendation based on the current strictures of evidence, which is fair enough, takes a very long time.
Next caller and presenter who delivers the lecture for his immense contribution to health delivery and for academic excellence as approved by the University Council. Today we are privileged to confer upon Professor David H. Molyneux, an honorary doctorate in a very brief ceremony. Professor David H. Molyneux, please step forward gently to receive your citation and award.
Citation in honor of Professor David H. Molyneux. Professor David Molyneux, you graduated in parasitology with an MA and a PhD from the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom. In the late 70s, you served as Professor of Biology and Dean of Sciences at Salford University in the UK for 2 decades. During this period, you contributed immensely through your research to the current body of knowledge on tropical parasites and vectors. Following your tenure as Dean, you served as the Director and Professor of Tropical Health Sciences at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine between 1991 and the year 2000. During this period, you also contributed significantly to global efforts to reduce the burden of parasitic and vector-borne diseases in your advisory capacity at the World Health Organization, particularly in the control of trypanosomiasis, onchocerciasis, lymphatic filariasis, and malaria. You are currently an honorary professor at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine and emeritus professor at the University of Liverpool. Professor Molyneux, you have had extensive work experience in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East over the course of your career. Through your research and training programs, you have authored over 400 publications, including research articles, reviews, contributions to books and textbooks on trypanosomiasis and leishmaniasis, and supervised over 50 PhD and master's students in various aspects of tropical diseases. Many of these students, who you painstakingly mentored, have over the years grown to become internationally renowned scientists and academics in their own right. You have consulted for many organizations, including the WHO, FAO, UNDP, the World Bank, and the UK government, and chaired several WHO committees on onchocerciasis and other tropical diseases. You served as Executive Secretary to the Global Alliance to Eliminate Lymphatic Filariasis between 2006 and 2010, and you are currently serving as an advisor to the European Foundation's Initiative for Neglected Tropical Diseases, an organization that supports African postdoctoral fellows from 5 European foundations. Professor Molyneux, your efforts as a key advocate have contributed to raising the profile of neglected tropical diseases, making them currently a priority for the World Health Organization and a target of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Your illustrious and committed service has been recognized globally. You were honored with the Chalmers Medal from the Royal Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene and the Wright Medal from the British Society for Parasitology in 1987 and 1989, respectively. Among others, you were also awarded a Doctor of Science in Salford University and Doctor of Science honoris causa in Georgetown University in the USA, and subsequently made an honorary fellow in Liverpool John Moores University in the UK for your impact on neglected tropical diseases. In 2017, you received the Dominic Kylem Prize in memory of one of your own students and longtime mentees for your exemplary contribution towards bridging the gap between NTD program implementation and academic research. Professor David Molyneux, UHAS is indeed proud to be associated with you and delighted to honor you on this 12th day of April 2019 with the Honorary Doctor of Science honoris causa degree for your unflagging impact on health and development in the world. Professor David Hurst Kofi Molyneux.
By the authority vested in me as the Chairman of Council, I, Justice Victor Jones Mawulong Doche, confer on you David H. Molino, an honorary Doctor of Science degree, honoris causa of the University of Health and Allied Sciences, this 12th April 2019. Congratulations.
Shall we keep the applause going?
Your Lordship, Justice Jones Donsey, Chairman of the University Council, Vice Chancellor Professor John Jacko, on distinguished guests, students, but all friends. It is a real personal delight and honour to be recognised by the University of Health and Allied Sciences. It's such an impressive environment with such an enthusiastic and youthful audience. Receiving an honorary degree, of course, is a special day for the recipient, and I'm truly honoured by the honour bestowed. I am now part of the body of UHAS, sort of a transplant into a world which has shaped so much of my professional life. Not only of my own life, but that of my family, and from which I've been so enriched personally and professionally. Professionally, it's self-evident from the science with which I've been associated, but personally from so many of the enduring friendships with many African colleagues, which have been such an essential part of my journey. Now, it's traditional on such occasions to offer words of advice because the recipient is perceived to be imbued with some element of wisdom. Let me attempt to fulfill this expectation within the short time I have, because you will have had enough from me over the last few days and you need a weekend to recover. First of all, I want to reiterate my admiration for the vision of President Mills in establishing UHAS as a truly relevant vision for Ghana, something which other countries need to follow. Progress and development cannot occur without a healthy population. Health needs many things, but critically it needs committed human capacity, and that is what the mission of UHAS embraces. I recall a statement made by a colleague many years ago. If you are healthy, you have 1,000 dreams. If you are sick, you have one. It applies to us all. However, for the poor, resolution of ill health and sickness is often the most challenging issue, and UHAS will make major contributions in the future through you, staff, and students. I've been privileged to share WHO committee roles with your Vice Chancellor, and I know he's totally committed to capacity strengthening. UHAS is the key institution which provides that for the future of Ghana. So staff and students, you have and are the future, and the skills staff have and the students appreciating those skills will equip them in the years to come in the many diverse roles that they will play in their careers. Let me reflect on what issues I might transmit in the way of wisdom, which might be construed as take-home messages. Your Vice Chancellor and I have been involved in the Global Filariasis Programme since its inception in 2000. The programme learned hugely from the work he did here in Ghana during his PhD, but neither of us probably realised in 2000 that nearly 20 years on where we would be. While hindsight is a great quality, looking into crystal balls is an even greater challenge. What I have learned and what messages can be passed on from working with countries and what success has been achieved. In summary, we have a partnership which has provided 7 billion treatments over 20 years. And most countries have eliminated the problem almost entirely. Populations have benefited massively from mass drug administration, which is the principal platform for the NTD momentum. $2 to $3 billion of drug donations every year have been achieved, and billions of dollars worth of health costs have been saved. Millions are no longer threatened from permanent disability. However, this is just one activity in many. With onchocerciasis and river blindness, which was a real scourge in Ghana, the sight of children leading irreversibly blind people is an historic picture. There is no longer a public health problem in the valleys of the Volta. That's a huge legacy, based on vector control and mass drug administration. People are no longer threatened with blindness as a result of a visionary multi-country program. And Ghanaian scientists have made massive contributions to this program. And the country has been an integral partner, providing unique expertise to these programs. And indeed, as Johnny Garpong said, 2 of the directors have been Ghanaian, and one is my very close friend, Wachi Burton, who's sitting in the audience. The result is that the old neglected tropical diseases, what the French called les grands ennemis, have largely disappeared from this country. River blindness, trachoma, guinea worm, sleeping sickness, filariasis, gone or almost gone. All due to the commitment of partnership and country leadership based on quality information and research, underpinned by the essential human capacity. The country is recognised as one with exceptional economic growth comparable, as I said yesterday, with India and China. Less than stability at the end of your other nations. In conclusion, Chair of Council, I have some key messages. The first is that in your professional life, demonstrate mutual respect, trust and understanding in personal as well as professional interactions. And what this means is what I refer to as parity of esteem. Each partner in a complex organisational structure and network brings different skills and visions. Respect these values and positions. Personally, I find that to what others are professional colleagues, to me, I feel that it's friendship, and the trust that friendship brings that drives successful collaboration. Inevitably, there are conflicts. If you're annoyed, count to 10. If you're very annoyed, count to 100. This was Thomas Jefferson's advice, and I find from a personal perspective this is a great challenge. Thirdly, give credit and acknowledge others' institutions. It costs nothing to recognise those contributions. It is courteous to what people deserve. Thank you is easy to say, but it's important to mean it. Fourthly, don't expect instant results from your endeavours. The time horizon for success, as I've mentioned over the last couple of days, is years, if not decades. Don't anticipate magic bullets and expect challenges, but persist and believe in yourselves. Finally, thank you all again for friendship, superb organisation and hospitality. I am now part of your institution, which I hope to see continue to grow and thrive. I hope I can serve you as a member of the university and look forward to continuing interactions. This is a special honour and a special day. Thank you.
As the Chairman of Council of University of Health and Allied Sciences, UHAS, I do hereby declare the second special congregation dissolved. Thank you.